We are sorry to have been absent the last week. After 15 years, we had to say goodbye to our beloved Yorkie named Roxie. Our lead developer was a bit torn up because of it and is bouncing back. But also, we've engaged a new format for our story outlines. We hope you enjoy the new features. We will be back in full swing within a couple days. Again, sorry for our absence.
Welcome, dear listener, to the captivating journey of Desert Revenant, a tale meticulously woven by the artisans at StoryWave.ai. Embrace this odyssey by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more mesmerizing tales. Chapter 1: The Final Goodbye. The veterinarian, a stern figure with a heavy heart, detailed the process with a voice clinical and detached. It was a conversation heavy with the weight of finality, yet devoid of the emotion usually accompanying such grave discussions. "It's the kindest choice," he said, his words echoing the hollowed halls of the clinic. Lehi nodded, a baritone murmur escaping his lips. "Yes, a mercy it is, to cease her suffering." Samantha interjected, her voice soft yet assertive. "But is it our right to decide the end for another?" Lehi's response was not immediate, his mind grappling with logic and the ethereal questions. "Life and death," he began, "they are natural counterparts. We intervene only to soften the harshness of reality." The vet left them with the decision, the room now a silent witness to their turmoil. Roxie twitched, her movements a macabre dance of what once was. Samantha traced the tattoo of an Ouroboros on her wrist, pondering the cycle of existence, as Lehi continued to rub his chin, lost in the desert of his thoughts. Hours passed, the clinic's clock marking the time with unfeeling precision until the couple's decision was made. With a solemn nod, they agreed to the final goodbye. The vet returned, administering the concoction that would gently usher Roxie into the eternal slumber. Lehi and Samantha left the clinic as the sun dipped below the horizon, its last light an eerie harbinger of the darkness to come. They didn't speak, their silence a heavy shroud as the desert reclaimed its stillness. That night, under an oddment of stars, the air in their home grew dense with the absence of life. Yet, as the first light of dawn stretched its fingers across the barren landscape, a stirring began. Roxie, small and frail no more, twitched with a vigor that defied the natural order. Lehi, awakened by a sound alien yet familiar, stumbled to find the once still Yorkie now pulsing with an uncanny vitality. Samantha, her eyes wide with disbelief, watched as Roxie's movements grew more pronounced, her growls now an otherworldly echo that filled the room with a predatory chill. "What have we done?" Samantha whispered, her gaze locked on the reanimated form of their beloved pet. Lehi, his logical mind unable to comprehend the impossible, stood frozen as the fabric of their reality began to unravel. Roxie's revival, an unexpected twist in the cycle they thought complete, now marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that would challenge the very essence of their existence. The desert, once a place of endings, now whispered of rebirth, and in the heart of its desolation, Lehi and Samantha faced the dawn of an abominable awakening. Chapter 2: Desert of the Real. Lehi, a figure of height and contemplation, peered through his glasses at the horizon, which seemed to waver in the heat. "You reckon the weather's turning?" he asked, his voice a baritone that carried the dryness of the desert. Samantha, her athletic form outlined against the barren landscape, turned to him, her eyes scanning the vast nothingness. "Does it matter?" she replied, her tone soft but carrying a weight. "There ain't no storm can cleanse what we've done." The walls of their home, adorned with remnants of a life once filled with more mundane concerns, now seemed to close in on them, as if to bear witness to their internal struggle. The stillness was broken only by the soft buzzing of a fly against the window, a sound that seemed to mock their predicament. Lehi walked over to the shelf where Roxie's collar lay, untouched since they'd returned home. "It was mercy, Samantha." Roxie was suffering, he stated, his words echoing off the walls, seeking conviction. Samantha clasped her hands together, the locket at her neck a small comfort. But was it ours to give? That's the torment I can't escape, she murmured, her voice betraying no emotion, but a profound sense of questioning hung in the air. The couple sat at their kitchen table, the wood worn from years of use, the surface reflecting the sparse light that managed to pierce the blinds. The silence between them spanned like the desert outside their door, vast and unyielding. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a sound that sent a shiver through the room, a scratching at the door, subtle yet undeniable. Lehi rose, his lanky frame casting a long shadow as he approached the noise. Samantha followed, her movements deliberate, almost mechanical. Lehi opened the door to reveal nothing but the swirling sands and the creeping twilight. "There's nothing here," he said, his voice a hollow confirmation of the emptiness before them. Samantha's gaze lingered on the threshold where Roxie would have greeted them, her presence an absence that filled the space. "It's just the wind," she agreed, her words barely a whisper, yet they carried the weight of their shared uncertainty. As night enveloped their home, the couple lay in their bed, the sound of the desert wind wrapping around the house like a shroud. Neither spoke, yet each was keenly aware of the other's restless turning, the bed a raft adrift in a sea of doubt and confusion. Lehi stared at the ceiling, his mind a labyrinth of thought, each turn leading back to the same question. Had they done right by Roxie? The darkness seemed to press in on him, a tangible force that held no answers. Samantha's eyes were open to the night, her thoughts a mirror of Lehi's. The soft hum of the air conditioning unit was a forlorn lullaby, a song of modern comfort that did little to soothe the turmoil within. As dawn painted the sky with strokes of pink and orange, the couple rose from their bed, their actions a routine devoid of purpose. The coffee pot gurgled, the toast popped, and the silence remained, a steadfast companion to their inner tumult. With each strange occurrence, each unexplained sound, the desert seemed to whisper to them. It was a world of harsh truths, where life and death danced in the heat, and where their actions had unleashed something beyond their understanding. Lehi and Samantha stood at the window, the desert sprawled before them, a landscape of stark beauty and unforgiving realities. It was a place of rebirth, but for them, it had become a prison of the mind, where doubt and guilt held sway over their once simple existence. Chapter 3: Night Terrors. Lehi's fingers paused on the keyboard, a sense of unease crawling over him. "You hear that, Sam? That scratching sound?" he asked, his voice a deep timbre, barely above a whisper. Samantha turned from the window, her gaze settling on the walls that seemed to tighten around them. "It's probably just the wind, or a critter out in the brush," she replied, her tone steady, but her words doing little to ease the tension that clung to the air like dust to skin. Their conversation was cut short by a more insistent scratching, a sound that seemed to claw its way through the walls. Lehi rose, his movements hesitant as he approached the source of the disturbance. Samantha followed suit, her athletic build tense, ready for whatever might come. The scratching grew louder, more desperate, as if whatever lurked beyond their door sought entry with a purpose beyond mere shelter. Lehi reached for the doorknob, his breath held in a moment of decision. Samantha's hand found the locket at her neck, the metal cool against her skin. With a swift motion, Lehi flung the door open, revealing the void of the desert night. There in the threshold stood Roxie, or rather what once had been Roxie. Her form was twisted, her silver and tan coat marred by patches of missing fur and exposed, decayed flesh. Her eyes, black as the void, held a malevolence that chilled the very air. Samantha stepped back, her heart racing, yet her voice betrayed no fear. "What is this abomination before us?" she demanded, the question hanging between them like a shroud. Lehi, his logical mind grappling with the impossible, responded with a tone of cold analysis. "A perversion of nature," he concluded, "an echo of life where there should be none." The creature that was Roxie moved, her limbs jerking in unnatural spasms, her growls a symphony of the damned. The couple watched, transfixed by the horror that confronted them, their home no longer a sanctuary, but a stage for nightmare. The night air grew colder, the desert silence amplifying the Revenant's grotesque display. Lehi and Samantha exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that this was a reality they could not accept, a truth too horrific to assimilate. Lehi's voice broke the stillness, his words an attempt to make sense of the senseless. "We must understand this curse that has befallen us," he intoned, his glasses reflecting the scant light as he peered closer at the monstrosity. Samantha, her perseverance like the desert stone, nodded. "There must be a reason, a cause for this corruption," she asserted, her hazel eyes not leaving the twisted form of their once beloved pet. The creature lurched forward, a step that defied the natural grace of a canine. Lehi and Samantha recoiled, their minds awash with questions, their belief in the natural order of things irrevocably shaken. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the Revenant of Roxie retreated into the darkness from whence it came, leaving Lehi and Samantha alone once more. The desert's vastness seemed to mock them, a landscape that offered no solace, no answers to the terror that had visited them. In the aftermath, the couple sat in silence, their home a prison of fear and uncertainty. The events of the night hung heavy in the air, a palpable presence that whispered of things beyond the realm of the living, a rebirth of darkness that neither Lehi nor Samantha could have ever predicted. Chapter 4: The Unearthing. Lehi, his tall frame casting a towering shadow, surveyed the disturbed ground with an analytical gaze. "Look here, the ground's been upturned, not just by natural means," he observed, his voice carrying the dry air's crackle. Samantha, her eyes shielded from the glaring sun by the curve of her hand, nodded in agreement. "And what's this?" she questioned, pointing toward a curious indentation in the earth, a symbol, ancient and cryptic, etched into the desert's canvas. The symbol, a complex array of lines and curves, seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, as though the desert itself had conspired to reveal it. Lehi, ever the seeker of logic, crouched beside the glyph. "It's no language, I know. Could be a message or a warning," he mused, his fingers tracing the edges of the design. Samantha leaned in closer, the symbol igniting a spark of recognition within her. "I've seen this before in old texts," she shared, her voice steady. "It speaks of cycles, of endings and beginnings." Their conversation was a dance of theories and conjectures, a verbal waltz that sought to make sense of the senseless. Lehi straightened, brushing the dust from his hands. "If this is a cycle, then what are we at the beginning of?" he posited, his question hanging in the air like the heat waves that danced upon the horizon. Samantha's reply was slow, measured. "Or what ending have we brought upon ourselves?" she added, the question rhetorical, its answer locked within the desert's silent vault. The day wore on, the sun's relentless gaze unyielding as they probed the depths of the desert's mysteries. They moved with purpose, their actions methodical as they examined the area around Roxie's grave, searching for more clues, more signs that might unravel the enigma before them. Lehi's voice broke the silence once more. "This desert holds more than just sand and stone," he declared, his words a voucher to their plight. "It guards its truths like a sentinel, ancient and immovable." Samantha's gaze returned to the symbol, her thoughts a whirlwind of ancient lore and modern reality. "We must dig deeper, unearth what lies beneath," she stated, her willpower mirroring the harsh landscape that surrounded them. As the sun began its descent, casting the desert in hues of orange and crimson, the couple stood by the symbol, their discovery a catalyst for change in a story that defied the natural order. The desert, a vast and timeless keeper of secrets, offered no solace, only the promise of more questions, each answer buried beneath layers of history and mystery. Lehi and Samantha left the site as the twilight encroached, the symbol an unaccompanied watcher in the growing darkness. Their journey back to their home was quiet, their minds occupied with the symbol's implications and the desert's refusal to surrender its secrets. The catalyst of their search had been unearthed, and with it, the certainty that their reality was no longer their own. The rebirth they faced was not one of life, but of understanding, a transformation that would challenge everything they thought they knew. Chapter 5: Summoning Shadows. Lehi spoke first, his voice steady. "We were told you might have answers," he said, his chin tilted upward in a gesture of resolve. The figure, draped in a cloak that seemed to drink in the daylight, regarded them with eyes that had seen the turning of countless moons. "Answers are but the beginning of more questions," he intoned, his words laced with the wisdom of the aged. Samantha stepped forward, her stance firm, the locket at her neck glinting in the sparse light. "We seek understanding about a symbol, one that has marked our lives with chaos," she declared, her tone devoid of warmth. The man's gaze flickered to the horizon, where the earth met the sky in a distant embrace. "The symbol you speak of is old, older than the tales told by the fireside," he began, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. "It speaks of cycles, of death, and of rebirth." Lehi's eyes narrowed behind his glasses, his mind a whirlwind of logic and skepticism. "And what of the creature that haunts us? A beast reborn from death's embrace?" he questioned, his words sharp as the cacti that dotted the landscape. The occult expert, a keeper of forgotten lore, turned his attention to the couple, his cloak billowing as if stirred by an unseen wind. "You have disturbed a delicate balance, and the desert has taken notice," he warned, his tone grave as the shadowed interior of his reclusive abode. Samantha's hand went to her wrist, the image of the Ouroboros tattooed upon her skin, a stark reminder of their plight. "How do we restore this balance?" she asked, her inquiry a key seeking a lock long sealed. The man's lips curled into a semblance of a smile, though no warmth reached his eyes. "The desert does not yield its secrets easily," he cautioned. "To walk this path is to invite the shadows that linger at the edge of reality." Lehi and Samantha exchanged a glance, their fortitude intermingling with the threads of uncertainty that wove through the very air. "We will face these shadows," Lehi stated, his declaration a covenant to their determination. The occult expert nodded, his movements deliberate. "Then prepare, for the shadows are drawn to those who bear the mark of change," he said, his voice fading like the light of day. As the couple departed, the shack seeming to recede into the desert as if it were a mirage, they knew the journey ahead would be fraught with peril. The strangers' cryptic warnings echoed in their minds, a chant of caution and intrigue that propelled them forward. The desert, indifferent to the struggles of those who dared to traverse its domain, stood as an ancient witness to the rebirth that loomed on the horizon, a rebirth not of life, but of understanding, where the shadows summoned would reveal the price of the knowledge they so desperately sought. Chapter 6: The Gathering Storm. Lehi examined a brittle tome, the pages yellowed with age as Samantha arranged the candles in a precise formation. "These texts, they speak of rituals. I can scarcely believe we're entertaining," he said, skepticism lacing his baritone voice. The expert, whose eyes seemed to hold the depth of the night sky, watched their preparations with a solemn stillness. "Belief is a luxury. What you must cling to now is purpose," he replied, his voice rich with the timbre of the unseen and the unheard. Samantha held a piece of chalk in her hand, uncertainty in her movements as she began to etch a circle around the gathering of arcane supplies. "Purpose, yes, but to what end?" she questioned, her words echoing the silent doubt that clung to the edges of her resolve. Lehi, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses, peered closer at a diagram in the book. "It says here we need to align the elements to the cardinal directions," he instructed, his logical mind finding solace in the semblance of structure within the chaos. The expert nodded, his cloak rustling like the whisper of sand against sand. "The desert listens, and it demands respect. Your actions this night must mirror that respect," he advised, his impenetrable presence a guidepost in the wilderness of their understanding. Samantha placed the final candle, her movements more assured as the ritual space took form. "A circle for protection, elements for balance," she recited, the words a mantra that fortified her against the creeping dread of the unknown. Lehi joined her within the circle, the two standing shoulder to shoulder as the expert began to chant in a language that was ancient and guttural, a sound that seemed to belong to the earth itself. The candles flickered, their flames casting a dance of light and shadow upon the faces of the couple. The expert's voice rose and fell, a cadence that matched the quickening pulse of the night. "Heed the forces that you summon. They are not to be trifled with," he warned, his tone a somber drumbeat against the silence. Lehi and Samantha exchanged a glance, their skepticism a shared barrier against the tide of fear that lapped at their consciousness. With each passing moment, the desert's vast expanse seemed to close in around them, a reminder of the enormity of the task at hand. As the ritual reached its zenith, the air grew thick, the very atmosphere charged with a power that defied explanation. The couple stood firm, their preparations a bulwark against the gathering storm of the supernatural that threatened to engulf them. The desert, a silent observer to their plight, seemed to hold its breath as the night deepened. Lehi and Samantha, guided by the occult expert's firm voice, braced themselves for a confrontation with entities that lay beyond the veil of their reality. The ritual complete, the couple awaited the outcome. Their own doubts and fears, a tempest, as formidable as any conjured by the ancient incantations. The night was alive with expectation. The desert a stage upon which the drama of rebirth would unfold, a rebirth not of flesh, but of understanding, as they faced the forces that they had unwittingly brought into their world. Chapter 7. Echoes of the Past. Lehi, peering through his thick-rimmed glasses, pulled out a tome that looked as though it had not felt the touch of human hands for generations. "This here might have something," he said, his voice low, almost blending into the hush that libraries command. Samantha leaned over his shoulder, her gaze fixed on the faded pages. "What does it speak of?" she inquired, her words deliberate, echoing the weight of the desert's burdensome heat outside. "The land we call home," Lehi began, "was once sacred, feared. Folks tell of spirits and curses, tales that chill the bones." He flipped through the pages, each turn a whisper against the silence. Samantha absorbed the words, her thoughts a whirlwind, sweeping through the canyons of her mind. "And these spirits," she pondered aloud, "do they speak of how to appease them, to calm the storm they bring?" Lehi shook his head, his baritone voice a steady drone. "There's mention of rituals, offerings, but no certainty, no guarantee of peace," he replied, the skepticism in his tone as clear as the desert sky. The librarian, an elderly gentleman, with a face as wrinkled as the leather-bound books he tended, shuffled over. "You're not the first to seek answers in the whispers of the past," he said, his voice as dry as the cracked earth outside. Lehi looked up, his blue eyes meeting the librarian's. "You know of others?" he asked, interest piqued despite his usual reserve. The librarian nodded, his movements slow and deliberate. "Many. The desert keeps its secrets, but sometimes it lets slip a few words," he shared, a knowing look in his eye. Samantha stepped closer, the locket at her neck glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Any words it might be letting slip now?" she asked, her voice betraying no emotion, though her mind raced. The librarian leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "They say when the coyotes howl against the moon, it's not just a call of the wild. It's a mourning, a lament for what's been disturbed," he confided, glancing around the quiet library as if the very books might be listening. Lehi closed the book with a soft thud, the sound final, like the closing of a coffin lid. "So we're to listen to coyotes and chase after ghost stories?" he questioned, his logical mind grappling with the folklore before him. Samantha's gaze returned to the shelves, each spine a sentinel guarding its own piece of the puzzle. "There's truth in legends sometimes," she mused, her voice steady, "and we're in need of truth." The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the library floor. Lehi and Samantha continued their research, the librarian watching them with eyes that hinted at a depth of knowledge unspoken. As the day's light waned, the couple gathered their findings, the weight of history pressing down upon them. Time was not their ally, and the past held its cards close to its chest. Their search for understanding was a race against the encroaching night, the desert's history a labyrinth with no clear exit. With each account of past horrors, each tale of unspeakable events, Lehi and Samantha felt the pull of the rebirth they sought to resist, a rebirth that threatened to sweep them away with the sands of time, into the echoes of the past that refused to be silenced. Chapter 8. Rituals of the Wicked. "We need to move swiftly," Lehi stated, the setting sun casting long shadows over his features. "The ritual site is not far, but the path is treacherous." Samantha, her eyes scanning the horizon, nodded. "We've prepared as much as we can." "Let's not waste the night's cover," she responded, her athletic form poised for the journey ahead. The keeper, his cloak a cascade of darkness, lifted a gnarled staff toward the stars that had begun to pepper the sky. "Matter, the revenants will be drawn to our intent." "We must be resolute," he intoned, his voice a gravelly echo of the desert's whispers. As they ventured into the night, the desert seemed to come alive with the scuttling of unseen creatures, the rustling of wind through desiccated brush, and the distant howl of a lone coyote. Samantha's hand went to the tattoo of the Ouroboros on her wrist, a reminder of the cycle they were entwined within. Lehi's baritone voice cut through the night as he addressed the keeper. "You speak of severing the source. What will it take to end this curse?" he asked, his question piercing the quietude like a shard of glass through silk. The keeper's steps were measured, his eyes ever forward. The ritual demands precision. Every symbol, every chant must align perfectly with the celestial dance, he explained, his words a ragbag of certainty and enigma. They navigated the gauntlet of horrors that lay between them and their destination, the revenants emerging as grotesque silhouettes against the backdrop of the night. Each one was a grotesque mockery of life, their movements a jerking ballet of the damned. Samantha's voice was steady, betraying no trace of fear. "We've faced worse than shadows and whispers," she declared, the sound of her voice a blade against the darkness. Lehi, his hand resting on the hilt of a knife at his belt, responded in kind. "We hold the line. Push forward," he commanded, his words a landmark in the draconian gloom. The keeper raised his staff, the symbols etched upon it glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. "The sight is near. Steel yourselves," he warned, his gaze staunch as the ritual ground came into view. A circle of stones lay ahead, their edges worn by the relentless kiss of time. At its center, a pedestal awaited, cold and unyielding, a history to the ancient rites that had birthed the scourge they now sought to end. Lehi and Samantha took their positions, their movements synchronized, their purpose singular. The keeper began the incantations, his voice rising and falling with the cadence of the ritual, the words old as the desert itself. As they enacted the rites, the revenants converged upon them, a tide of malice and corruption seeking to thwart their efforts. Lehi and Samantha met them with cold resolve, their actions a dance of defiance as the keeper's chants wove a ragbag of power around the ritual site. The night air trembled with the force of the ritual, the desert itself a witness to the struggle between the living and the revenants. As they fought to sever the source of corruption, the resistance of the damned was palpable, a wall of despair and darkness. But Lehi, Samantha, and the keeper stood firm against the onslaught, their actions a history to their staunch determination. The desert, once a place of endings, now bore witness to the possibility of an end to the cycle of corruption, a rebirth not of flesh, but of a land cleansed of wickedness, if only they could withstand the storm of revenants that sought to claim the night. Chapter 9, Descent into Madness. Lehi's gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the moon hung low, its face distorted as if viewed through a warped lens. "The sky's all wrong," he muttered, his voice barely carrying over the vast expanse. Samantha, her hand resting on the locket at her neck, squinted against the darkness that seemed to press in from all sides. "Nothing's right anymore. Can't even trust my own eyes," she replied, her voice flat, betraying no hint of the confusion that gripped her. The air around them began to shimmer, a heat haze where there should be none, the desert floor beneath them a conglomerate of cracking clay and creeping shadows. Lehi's eyes darted to and fro, seeking an anchor in the chaos that unfolded. The ground. "It's like it's breathing," Lehi observed, his analytical mind trying to rationalize the surreal landscape that buckled under his feet. Samantha's gaze followed a shadow that darted just beyond the reach of their vision. "We're being toyed with, Lehi. Someone, something, doesn't want us to leave," she said, the facts stated with a clarity that cut through the uncertainty. They moved through the desert, each step a question, each breath a demand for the truth. The world around them twisted further, the fabric of reality a cloth being torn asunder by unseen hands. Suddenly, Samantha stopped in her tracks, her eyes locked on a figure that stood in the distance, a silhouette that was both alien and achingly familiar. "Do you see her? Roxie?" she called out, her voice a torch for the apparition that beckoned. Lehi, following her gaze, saw nothing but the undulating waves of heat. "There's nothing there, Sam. It's the desert playing tricks," he answered, though his own certainty waned with each passing second. The figure of Roxie, or the illusion of her, moved with an unnatural grace, her form shimmering like a mirage on the edge of existence. Samantha took a step forward, only to be held back by Lehi's firm grasp. "We can't follow shadows. We need to focus, find our way out of this mind maze, Lehi insisted, his voice the rope they both clung to as the mental onslaught continued. But the desert was relentless. Time stretched and folded upon itself, minutes bleeding into hours, or perhaps it was the other way around. Lehi and Samantha found themselves walking in circles, the ritual site an elusive memory that danced just beyond reach. Samantha looked to Lee, her expression one of grim determination. This place, it's a prison without bars. But we're not its captives, she stated, her willpower a steel blade unsheathed in the face of madness. Lehi nodded, his own determination a silent echo of hers. Then let's carve our path, Samantha. Let's reclaim our reality, he said. And together, they stepped forward into the fray of their own minds, the desert their adversary in a battle of wills that had no clear victor. As the night waned and the stars above began to realign into familiar patterns, Lehi and Samantha emerged from the desert's cruel labyrinth, their senses wary, their grasp on reality tenuous. The betrayal they had endured was not of flesh and blood, but of the mind, a psychological torture that questioned the very ground they stood upon. With the dawn came a clarity, a respite from the night's terrors. The desert lay still, its secrets buried deep beneath the sands, watching, waiting, as Lehi and Samantha prepared for what lay ahead. The rebirth they sought was not yet within their grasp, the cycle of madness a wheel that continued to turn, as relentless as the desert's sun. Chapter 10, The Abyss Gazes Back. Lehi, his tall form a stark outline against the barren landscape, broke the silence with a voice that resonated with a calm that belied the chaos around them. The horizon, it just keeps on moving, like a mirage that's forever out of reach. Samantha, her gaze fixed on the shifting dunes, nodded in agreement. It's as if the whole place is alive, watching us, waiting for something, she said, her tone even, reflective of her pragmatic nature. They forged ahead, each step a defiance of the desert's will, their goal to escape the embrace of darkness that seemed to grow tighter with every passing hour. The air shimmered around them, the heat a visible specter that danced upon the ground. As the sun declined, the world around them took on an otherworldly hue, the sky a canvas of purples and reds that bled into one another. It was then the desert revealed its most cruel illusion yet, as shapes began to emerge from the sands, forms that twisted and turned in impossible ways. Samantha's hand went to a worn map, its edges frayed from use. This place isn't on any chart, Lehi. It's as if we've walked into a land that doesn't want to be found. Lehi, his eyes scanning the horizon for any familiar landmark, replied, We've come too far to let this wasteland turn us around. We've got to keep moving, find a way out. The shapes drew nearer, and as they did, it became clear they were no mere tricks of the light. Figures, humanoid in form but grotesque in their contortions, encircled the pair, their twisted visages a mirror to the fears that lurked within. Samantha, her voice betraying no hint of the trepidation that tightened its grip, spoke with a clarity that cut through the encroaching dread. These phantoms, they feed on our worries, our doubts. We can't let them hold sway. Lehi, his hand resting on the hilt of a knife, its blade glinting in the fading light, added, Our minds are our own, Samantha. These horrors can't define our fate. Together they faced the abyss that gazed back, the desert's challenge a gauntlet thrown at their feet. As the figures drew closer, their forms became clearer, each a grotesque caricature of a memory, a moment of weakness, a secret fear brought to life. The couple moved with purpose, their steps measured, their decisiveness unyielding as they navigated through the crowd of nightmares made flesh. They did not speak, their focus absolute, their wills a flare that no darkness could extinguish. As night fell and the stars cast their indifferent light upon the earth, Lehi and Samantha emerged from the gauntlet, their grip on the earthly plane tenuous but intact. The desert's embrace of darkness had sought to consume all hope, to drown them in a sea of despair. Yet, as they stood beneath the vast expanse of the cosmos, the silence around them was not one of defeat but of a challenge met. The disaster of the night had passed, their reactions an instrument to their fortitude, and the decisions reached were etched in the very sands that had sought to claim them. The rebirth they pursued was now a horizon tinged with the faintest light of dawn, a promise that the abyss, while ever present, would not claim their souls this night. The desert, a crucible of transformation, had witnessed their struggle and found them not wanting. Chapter 11. Eclipse of the Heart. Lehi, his eyes scanning the churning heavens, broke the silence with a voice that betrayed no tremor. "Looks like the sky's about to swallow us whole," he said, his tone analytical, as if he were considering a particularly complex code. Samantha, with a gaze that could cut through steel, peered into the void that spread before them. "This is it, then." "The heart of it all," she stated, her voice devoid of warmth, yet not lacking in resolve. Their bond, unspoken yet as tangible as the sand beneath their feet, became the fulcrum upon which they would tilt the scales in this final confrontation. The evil force, a maelstrom of ancient spite, loomed like a tide eager to crash upon them and wash away their defiance. Lehi's hand moved to the array of tools at his belt, each a talisman and testament to their journey. "We use what we've learned, what we've built. It's not just about survival now," he declared, his gaze never leaving the swirling abyss. Samantha nodded, her hand unconsciously tracing the Ouroboros on her wrist. "We're more than just two people lost in the desert. We've become a part of this place," she acknowledged, her acknowledgement a blade honed by trials. The void churned closer, a living thing with hunger vast and insatiable. Lehi and Samantha stood, their silhouettes stark against the encroaching darkness, their preparations a shield against the onslaught. Lehi, ever the thinker, spoke again. "Remember the symbols, the patterns. They're the key," he reminded, each word a stone in the foundation of their stand. Samantha's response was a nod, her movements precise as she began to lay out the symbols in the sand, a language of hope in a landscape that had forgotten the word. They worked in tandem, the dance of their actions a silent symphony that rose above the howl of the void. Lehi's constructs, devices of his own invention, hummed with potential, while Samantha's knowledge of the old ways lent power to their barrier. The evil force descended, a tidal wave of malice that sought to crush them, to snuff out their light. Lehi and Samantha braced, their bond a conduit through which they channeled their combined strength. As the maelstrom bore down upon them, their union, a thing of quiet power, flared bright against the darkness. The desert, once a place of endings, now bore witness to a stand that would mark the beginning of an end, whether in triumph or in tragedy. Their goal was unity, their disaster the overwhelming might of their foe. Their reactions were not of fear but of focus, and the decisions they reached were carved in the very stone of their resolve. The rebirth they sought was not theirs alone, but that of a world teetering on the brink of oblivion. Chapter 12. Dawning Hope. Lehi, his tall frame leaning heavily against a boulder, his clothes tattered, spoke in a voice that carried the weight of their experiences. "The sun's rising, just as it always does. Makes you think, doesn't it?" Samantha, standing a few paces away, her athletic form outlined by the growing light, responded without looking at him. "That no matter what happens, the world keeps spinning? Yeah, I reckon it does," she said, her words reflecting a groundedness that the night could not shake. They moved through the desert, their steps deliberate as they began the long journey back to what they once called normalcy. The shadows of trauma followed them, a reminder of what they had endured, the scars they now bore, both seen and unseen. Lehi glanced at Samantha, noting the bandage wrapped around her arm, a stark white against her sun-kissed skin. "We got through it, Sam. Not unscathed, but we're here," he remarked, his tone one of observation, not comfort. Samantha paused, her eyes on the horizon where the sky met the earth in a delicate dance of colors. "We did. But this place, it's marked us. The healing's only just begun." Their conversation continued as they traversed the rugged terrain, each sentence a step toward understanding the transformation that had taken place within them. The desert, indifferent to their plight, offered no respite, only the relentless march of time and the promise of distance from the night's terrors. Lehi's hand found a small, smooth stone at his feet, turning it over in his fingers. "We'll need to find new ways to cope, new strategies to keep the darkness at bay," he said, his voice the sound of tenacity in the face of challenge. Samantha looked back at him, her hazel eyes reflecting the dawn's light. "And we will. We've seen the worst of it, faced it head on. We can take on the day-to-day," she said, her statement one of fact, not reassurance. As they walked, The desert around them began to stir with life, the scuttle of a lizard, the distant call of a bird, each a token to the persistent essence of the wilds that had so tested them. Lehi and Samantha knew the road to recovery would be long and fraught with reminders of the past. Yet with each step, they distanced themselves from the night, from the abyss that had gazed back with such ferocity. The rebirth they had experienced was not one of joy, but of survival. The redemption found in the simple act of continuing, of placing one foot in front of the other. Their goal was to reclaim their lives, their disaster, the lingering whispers of trauma. Their reactions were measured, practical, and their decisions were those of survival, not belief. In the dawning hope of the new day, the couple emerged from the desert's grasp, the ordeal behind them a chapter closed, yet forever etched in the story of their lives. The desert, a crucible that had tested their mettle, now lay behind them, a silent witness to their rebirth. Chapter 13, Reclamation. You reckon the desert's always been this quiet in the dawn? Lehi asked, his voice betraying a hint of wonder rather than fear. Ain't sure what to reckon anymore, Samantha replied, her words measured, reflecting the vast change in their world. Seems like it's been ages since we just watched the sunrise without dread. Lehi nodded, the brim of his hat casting a shadow over his eyes. Feels like we're walking on the edge of two worlds, one where every cactus shadow might jump at you, and one where it's just a plant trying to survive. Samantha let out a small chuckle, dry as the desert air. Never thought I'd appreciate a cactus, or the buzz of a fly for that matter. The couple made their way back to their modest home, the structure a testament to endurance. The door creaked as they entered, the sound a familiar greeting rather than an ominous warning. Inside, the remnants of their ordeal were tucked away, the ordinary objects of daily life resuming their rightful places. Lehi poured 2 cups of coffee, the aroma a comforting blanket. We got routines to get back to. Can't let what happened define our every move, he said, setting a cup down for Samantha. You speaking truth, Lehi, but routines don't make what happened just vanish like smoke, Samantha remarked, accepting the coffee with a nod. It's like we gotta weave what happened into the fabric of now. Lehi leaned against the kitchen counter, his hands wrapped around his own mug. Maybe that's just it. Weave it in. Don't let it unravel us. As the day stretched on, they tended to their tasks, the mundane actions a balm to the still fresh scars. The clucking of chickens and the rustling of leaves were sounds that marked a return to normalcy, yet beneath each was the undercurrent of what they had survived. Samantha paused, her hand resting on the fence as she looked out over the land. This place, it's got a way of holding on to you, she mused, her voice steady. Lehi joined her, his gaze following hers. Yeah, holds on and doesn't let go. But maybe that's not as bad as we thought. As the sun set, painting the sky with strokes of fire, Lehi and Samantha sat on their porch, the world around them quiet, save for the sounds of the desert evening. Their conversation, once fraught with tension, now flowed with the ease of a river over smooth stones. Tomorrow's another day, Lehi said, his voice a note of finality in the symphony of dusk. And we'll meet it, just like we met today, Samantha added, her silhouette blending into the growing shadows. Life was returning, a semblance of routine carved from the bedrock of their experiences. The desert, once an echo chamber for horrors, now resonated with the promise of reclamation, its vastness a reminder of the small but significant victories of the human spirit. Chapter 14, The Legacy. Samantha, emerging from the shadows cast by the sun's retreat, joined Lehi. Her steps were deliberate, mirroring the careful movements of the desert's nocturnal creatures. Got a message today from the town, she said, her voice devoid of inflection. Seems like word's gotten out. Lehi turned, his profile etched against the darkening expanse. Word about what? Our little dance with the devil, he asked, his question hanging in the air, unanswered by the silent expanse. Samantha leaned against the wooden fence, its posts worn by time and elements. Mourn that. People are talking, saying we stirred something beyond the grave. They're curious, maybe even scared. The conversation unfolded with the night, their words a litter interwoven with the growing realization that their actions had cast ripples far beyond their solitary stretch of wilderness. A worn leather book lay on the porch table, its pages filled with cryptic texts and symbols, evidence of their delve into the arcane. "You think we ought to be worried?" Lehi asked, his tone even, reflecting his attempt to navigate the uncertain path laid out before them. Samantha's fingers traced the grain of the fence, her eyes not leaving the horizon. Worried? No. Cautious, maybe. We've dealt with worse than gossip and sideways glances. As the stars began their nightly vigil, the couple noticed unfamiliar markings near the edge of their land, symbols that seemed to seep darkness into the ground around them. Lehi crouched down, examining the signs with a scrutinous gaze. "These ain't natural. They're like a signal or a mark," he observed, his voice betraying no concern, only curiosity. Samantha stood beside him, her silhouette merging with the lengthening shadows. "A mark for what, though? Are we talking a warning or something beckoning?" The conversation was not rushed, but carried the urgency of the situation, their exchange punctuated by the sounds of the desert, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of the wind through the creosote. Lehi straightened, dusting the sand from his hands. "Could be either, or both. But it means we're not alone in this. Others are watching, drawn to the aftermath." Samantha nodded, her gaze now fixed on the book that seemed to thrum with a life of its own. "So we keep our eyes open, keep watch for whatever or whoever comes next." Their dialogue, a ponderous melody of words and silences, continued as they prepared for the night. The desert around them was a witness to their vigilance, the sands holding the secrets of a legacy that was theirs, but no longer only theirs. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, Lehi and Samantha settled in, the homestead a fortress against the potential darkness that loomed. They knew the fight was not over. It had merely shifted, transformed, as had they. The rebirth they had undergone was not a conclusion but a prelude, the opening notes to a symphony that played on in the heart of the desert. Chapter 15, Whispers of the Desert. Samantha Wells, lean and watchful, came to stand beside him. "You hear it too, don't you?" she asked, her voice a whisper barely carried by the breeze. "The desert's speaking, but not with any tongue we know." Lehi nodded, the brim of his hat casting a shadow over his thoughtful face. "Yeah, it's like it's full of voices, just below the edge of hearing," he responded, his words measured and careful. The two of them listened as the wind picked up, a soft soughing that carried with it the hint of murmurs and laughter, a spectral symphony just beyond the threshold of understanding. "It's playing tricks again," Samantha stated, her hand resting on the fence post, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the shimmering heat. Lehi's gaze followed a tumbleweed as it danced across the sand, skittering like a creature alive. "Maybe, or maybe it's warning us. There's a weight to it, a feeling like we're on the edge of something big." Samantha turned her head, considering the distant mountains, their peaks like jagged teeth biting at the sky. "If it's a warning, what's it for? More trouble heading our way?" Lehi took his hat off, running a hand through his hair. "Could be. The desert doesn't give up its secrets easy. We learned that much." They continued their vigil, the land around them a canvas of tranquility that belied the tension in the air. The whispers grew louder, a susurrus of sound that seemed to echo with the ghosts of ancient battles and forgotten rites. "You reckon those are just echoes of the past, or something more?" Lehi inquired, his blue eyes squinting as he peered into the distance. Samantha's reply was slow in coming, her thoughts turning like the gears of a clock running down. "The past, the future, it's all the same out here. Time gets twisted up, and we're caught in the spiral." Their words drifted away on the wind, mingling with the whispers that rose and fell like the tide. In the quiet that followed, a mirage flickered on the horizon, a play of light and shadow that hinted at figures moving, gathering. Lehi watched, his curiosity a steady flame. "Looks like a gathering, but it's nothing more than heat and light playing tricks." Samantha wasn't so sure, or it's a glimpse of what's to come. "The desert's full of tricks, yeah, but it doesn't lie. Not about things like that." The sun dipped lower, the sky ablaze with colors that no painter could capture. In that twilight hour, the whispers seemed to grow bolder, as if gaining strength from the darkness encroaching upon the land. Lehi's hand found the old, leather-bound book that rested on the porch railing. "We best keep our eyes open, our minds sharp. Ain't no telling what's next." Samantha gave a curt nod, her silhouette etched against the dying light. We'll be ready. Whatever comes out of the desert, we'll meet it head on. As night descended, the couple retreated into their home, the whispers of the desert a constant undercurrent to their preparations. The knowledge that darkness never fully receded was their companion, a silent acknowledgement that the tranquility was but the calm before another storm. Chapter 16, New Dawn. The desert, once a malevolent force, now lay subdued, its sands glistening with the promise of a new beginning. The scars of the land mirrored those unseen, carried by both Lehi and Samantha, remnants of their ordeal that time would not easily erode. Lehi's voice broke the stillness, his words deliberate. Never thought we'd see the other side of that darkness. The desert's got a way of changing a person. Samantha stepped out, her boots crunching on the wooden porch as she joined him at the railing. That it does. Makes you wonder what's left after everything's stripped away. They watched in silence as the sun climbed higher, the light chasing away the last shadows of night. The desert seemed to inhale deeply, embracing the warmth that spilled over its vast expanse. You reckon we're different now? Lehi finally asked, his tone neutral, the question hanging between them, like the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. Guess that depends on what you mean by different, Samantha replied, her gaze not leaving the sunrise. We faced something fierce, something that'd break most folks. We're still standing. Lehi nodded, the brim of his hat bobbing slightly. Yeah, standing and moving forward. Got no other choice, do we? Samantha's lips twitched, the hint of a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Nope, no other choice. But maybe that's all right. Maybe that's just what living is. The couple remained there, the day warming around them, the tranquility of the morning, a obvious variance to the chaos that once reigned. The desert, their silent witness, bore the marks of transformation, a confirmation to the rebirth they had unwittingly become a part of. Lehi's gaze finally shifted from the horizon to Samantha. We've got work to do, land to tend, life to live. Samantha turned to face him, her posture resolute. We do, and we'll do it together, like we've done everything else. As the new dawn embraced the world, Lehi and Samantha started their day, the tasks ahead a familiar rhythm to the beat of their existence. The remnants of their ordeal lingered, not as specters to haunt them, but as memories of the strength they found in themselves and in each other. The sun, now fully risen, crowned the sky with its fiery presence, a daily rebirth that echoed their own. The desert, once an adversary, now offered its silent benediction as Lehi and Samantha stepped into the new chapter of their lives. Chapter 17, Horizons Beyond. Samantha, standing a few paces back, adjusted the brim of her hat against the glare. This place, it's part of us now, she said, her voice carrying across the stillness. Lehi turned, his gaze steady. Always was, I reckon. But now there's more. Opened a door we can't shut. Guess there's doors like that all over if you know where to look, Samantha replied, scanning the terrain that had so recently been a battleground of otherworldly forces. Lehi stood and dusted off his trousers. A war between light and shadow, and we're caught in the middle. Didn't ask for it, but here we are. Samantha walked over to join him. We're just two people, Lehi, but two people can make a difference. Sometimes that's all it takes. Their words, a back and forth of perspectives and insights, flowed as naturally as the sands shifting beneath their boots. They were survivors of a hidden war, veterans of an ancient conflict that few would ever recognize or understand. You think others will come, following the path we blazed? Lehi asked, his tone even, contemplative rather than concerned. Samantha squinted at a distant ridge where the world seemed to drop away into nothingness. Maybe, but whatever comes, we'll face it like we always do. Lehi nodded, his thoughts turning like the wheels of a train gaining momentum. We'll keep watch, keep fighting if we have to. But we'll also live, Samantha. Can't forget to do that. Yeah, living's the part that matters, Samantha agreed, her eyes now fixed on the horizon, where the sky met the earth in a dance of light and color. They made their way back to the homestead, the structure a defiant testament to their strength. The desert, once a predictor of their darkest days, now whispered of horizons beyond, of a story that continued even as this chapter came to a close. As the day waned and the sunset painted the sky with streaks of fire, Lehi and Samantha stood beside the tracks that cut through the desert, a steel lifeline that promised journeys yet to come. A train, its engine a heart of fire and steam, approached from the east, its whistle a cry that pierced the tranquility of the dusk. Lehi watched it come, the embodiment of relentless progress, of humanity's refusal to stand still. Samantha's hand found Lehi's as the train drew nearer, its wheels a thunderous crescendo upon the tracks. We're part of something bigger, Lehi. Always were. The train slowed, its carriages a procession of possibilities, each window a tale untold. Lehi and Samantha stepped aboard, their gazes locked on the path ahead, the desert receding behind them. As the train moved forward, the desert's whispers faded into the night, and the couple faced the future with a quiet acceptance that some battles were eternal, their roles within them forever changed. The rebirth they had experienced was not an end, but a beginning, the first steps on a journey that stretched beyond the horizon into realms of light and shadow. The end. Desert Revenant was generated by patent-pending AI technology developed by StoryWave. Any resemblance to real events, persons, or copyrighted material is purely coincidental. StoryWave does not endorse or promote any specific views, opinions, or actions portrayed in this story. We thank you for experiencing the wonder of AI alongside us. Let StoryWave AI continue to weave stories from your imagination by supporting us with a like, share, and subscription. Join us for more narrative voyages daily. April 2024. Till we meet again.